hastily made this one last night, so it's a lot thicker than it needs to be. It only needs to be about a third that thick, but I used scrap wood and threw it together real quick. It works just the same. It's just I prefer to use 8 mesh wire, and I piece together screen wire and 8 mesh wire, whatever I could find to make it work. A little bit about how I use a double screen. It says splitting, and I'm going to use splitting and double queening all at the same time because I do it the same way. But I had a mentor back I started in the late 70s that ran 2 queen hives using the double screen, and that's the way I ran bees. Everything I did every year until I became full-time beekeeper migratory and went to Florida for the winter. And I can't do that with the number of hives I got, but if I lived in Kentucky, I'd run 2 double deeps and I'd run 2 queen hives. So in the springtime, what I would do is I'd go through my bees and see about where my strength was, and I equalized every hive when I set these 2 queens up. And on splitting, we're going to do it the same way. I'm just going to teach kind of both of them at the same time. Now, I got a question, y'all, before I start, and I've kind of hinted at it a minute ago. When does the new beekeeping year start? When you start a new year in beekeeping, when does that start? Yep, y'all are catching on. You're saying fall. People used to say February, March, whatever. The rainfall you get starting in August and September and the first little bit of October determines how much clover you're going to have if you're in central Kentucky. May not affect poplar, but it'll affect that. And how you get your bees ready for winter up till now, you should have all your mite treatments done and be done, determines how much success you're going to have next spring, how good a hive you're going to have. If you don't have them mama laying right now and you're in a drought, you haven't done some stimulated feeding, or you haven't taken care of your mites, you're going to have a dead hive or a weak hive, and then you're not going to make much honey. So what I did, and I live in central Kentucky, so this doesn't really apply to western Kentucky, but I would go through and look, how many bees do I have in these hives the last week of March, and I'd have queens on order to come in that week. And I would equalize them when I split them. You know, I'd have 2, 3, or 4 frames of brood in each one of them, and a frame of honey in each one. And I'd put the old queen to bottom and new queen in top. And I'd run those as 2 queen hives until usually about the end of April. And I could either pinch the old queen's head off, pull her out on a frame of brood, put her in a newt box, pull the double screen out. And I've got 16 frames of bees, a brood, and 2 boxes of bees, and 60,000 hives of bees make 4 times the honey of 40,000 bees in hive. You'll make 4 times as much honey. You know, the population, you got to have about 30,000 bees to maintain that hive. Anything above that, you get a higher concentration of field force and more honey. So 4 times as much honey if you have a hive that's got, say, 40, 50,000 bees versus 30, that's why you got to prevent swarming. So anyway, what we would do when we wanted to split these, or you want to make a split out of a hive, the way I used to do it, I'd go through and try to find a queen. And sometimes I could, first frame she's on. Sometimes you go through all 20 and then she's down here on the bottom board crawling around, or she's over here on the hive wall crawling around. And you've taken you 20 minutes looking, 30 minutes. And the other thing you got to be careful with, and this is not really in this class, when you take the inner cover off, make sure she ain't sitting on it. I've had them sit on the inner cover before. And then you put it on the ground, bounce it a little, now your queen's down there and you've lost your queen. So anytime you take that hive apart, check to make sure you're not putting the queen over here on the ground. So I would go through and I'd find mama, and I'm going to make a split up. If I wanted to leave them in that yard, you'd get a lot of drift. Well, you make a split up, and you put some extra bees in there, and you found mama, and you put your split over there, and half of them flew back over here, and your brood chilled. Well, maybe you don't have enough bees, or you don't have a second yard, or don't want a second yard. Well, there's a problem. So I learned how to do this, and what I try to do my normal double screens have more than one entrance. They'll have an entrance here and an entrance on the side. I don't run 2 queen hives, so I just make one entrance, because the only thing I use these for now is rearing queens. And I rear my queens in a queen right hive using a double screen. There's all kinds of uses for these. uniting hives, winter and weak colony over strong colony, rearing queens, 2 queen hives. There's all kinds of uses for a double screen. Probably it's the most underused, best piece of equipment you could own. But I'm getting ready to make a split. I don't look for the queen anymore. Found this out after I'd done it for 30 years the wrong way. I go in, find the frame of brood I want, preferably got some open brood on it, shake the bees off, put it in my split box. Whether that's a nuke box to make or a box I'm going to leave on top for 2 queen or split really doesn't matter. But I put it over here in my box. Find me another good frame of brood. If you want to use, I use 2 frames of brood, except when I'm rearing my queens I use 1, but shake the bees off, put it in the box, get a frame of honey and do the same thing. Now what that does, I'll set that back above an excluder. Let the young nurse bees come up above that. They don't drift like field bees do. So now you've got young nurse bees, that's why I want some open brood. You got those young nurse bees taking care of those eggs and those larvae and feeding it that are young, that haven't gone out and oriented much, and are not going to go out and fly, so you don't get the drift. So therefore you don't have chill brood like I've had happen before. The other thing is I leave the entrance closed up on the nuke box or on this. I would leave the entrance closed. Once I let that come back up, I take the queen excluder out, put my double screen on. I leave that thing closed up for a day or 2. They'll reorient. Now what I did on my entrance, I put it on the back or the side. I usually like to put it on the back or side so they don't get tempted to go back down below. And then once if I wanted to unite that colony back together, I was running 2 queen colony. I put the 2 together and put this up on top and put a piece of wood or something where I could leave it open. And the ones that had been coming in the back would find this, and then they would, over a period of a couple of weeks, they'd start going out the front door because this was small and up on top turned that way. And then that'll eliminate that problem. But when you want to use you want to make splits, whether you're doing it as using a double screen and run a 2 queen hive, or you want to make up some nukes to sell, to me the easiest way to do it is shake the bees off the frames, put them above a queen excluder, and leave them. I've left them as little as 4 or 5 hours, 3 hours. Leave them overnight or whatever, and then come back and put them in your nuke box, or take the double screen out, take the queen excluder out and put this in with the entrance to the back or side, and then put your split up on top of it. If cold weather's coming, it'd be a great way to do it, to keep it warm. You got queens came in, it's going to get cold. You put your split up here on top of this, the bottom colony's warm, the warm air comes up, and then when the weather changes, you can go out there and put it over in your nuke box. Move it over and just leave it closed up so they don't drift. But I made up, last week, I had a bunch of nukes stacked 2 and 3 high, and I used a queen excluder, and I split them all into where they were all going, where they'd be level, same height, 1 box. And when I moved them off, I let the door close 2 days. I didn't open the little door up on the nuke box, and I opened it up, and I haven't had any drift at all. I mean, they're all about the same strength. I had 1 or 2 bees here or there or something, but very pleased with the results of it. I never put the queen in a split for at least till they start fanning their queenless, at least 2 or 3 hours, preferably overnight. I think I used to make my splits up, stick the queen in as soon as I got done. Well, she's a stranger and they don't know they don't have mama yet. Now she's a foreign queen, they don't really want to take her. But if you want to get 99% take on your queens, the easy way to do that is crazy, but you either make your split up a week before the queens come, or you leave the stopper in the cage, which I did on everything I put in last week. And you go back 6-7 days later and you knock out all the supersedure cells if there are any. Now they can't raise a queen. And if they got candy in, let them eat through the candy. If they don't, spray them with Honeybee Healthy and wait a day and put a little Honeybee Healthy in the sugar syrup and kind of mist that queen, and then pull the cork out and release her. I think I put 100 in. I got 97 takes. And that's with no honey flow on. If I had honey flow on, I probably got 99. I was pretty happy with that percentage. But I even in Florida this year, I requeened 300 hives using queens because I couldn't raise queens because I didn't have any honey flow and I had no pollen flow. And I bought the queens. I did the same thing. I went in and put all the old queens out and waited a week. And it took a lot of work. Knocked out all the queen cells, put my new queen in. But when you're paying $3,000, $9,000 for 300 queens, I'll work a week to save them. It's worth my time to, put that extra time in when I got that much money tied up in those queens. But using this to divide, it's the same principle when I raise queens. And I'm kind of incorporating a lot of stuff in here with the double screen. When I used to raise my queens, I'd make a hive queenless, pull mama out, put her in a newt box over here somewhere, and I'd do graft into 4 or 5 hives. I come back one day, got ready to take my queen cells out, and they're all eaten down. I get to looking, there's a green mark queen in there. And she didn't come from the hive where it was. I knew where the green mark queen was. She was a redhead. She came from a hive over there that I grafted in, put her in a newt box over here. She packed up and left and come back in this hive that was queenless and ate my queen cells down. Well, that's really irks you when you got 50 cells that get eaten down you think you got today, and you don't. So I do the same thing. I split the hive using these and raise queens in a queen right hive. And what I'm basically doing then is I'm raising a swarm queen. And your swarm, I don't care what anybody tells you, swarm cell queens are the best queens you can get because they are raised when the bees want to raise them and under the prime conditions. So the way I raise queens is I go in and find the old queen, put her in a box over here, and in the bottom box where I'm going to graft, I want an open frame of honey and an open frame of brood in there, I want some open nectar in a frame of honey, but I want some open nectar. I want an open frame of brood right up next to her, where my graft frame it goes in a frame of fresh, pollen if I can get it there, or use pollen, so much better to have a frame of pollen. And I put 2 or 3 more frames of brood in there, and some honey, and I put it down on the bottom of the bottom board. And I put the double screen on with an entrance to the back. And I put mama and the young brood up here. I'll have open brood where my queen is, but I have the rest cap broods hatching at the bottom. I want those young bees, nurse bees, coming out to nurse my queen. And I put mama up here today. She's up top. The bottom box down here is queenless. It's set up like I want it to graft into. This box up here has got mama and the rest of the bees. Well, over a day, and I do this in a wait a day, and all the bees come from up here. When they come back home, they go down there, the field bees. Now that hive is just jam-packed full of bees. There's not that many bees up here. It's still enough to cover the brood. So the next day I come back, I switch them. Put mama on the bottom, and I put this up on top. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't tell that right. I come back the next day and I graft in the bottom. I put my grafts in. Hive's queenless. Mama's up here. Once I got the graft in the bottom box, the next day, which would be Monday, you set them up. Tuesday, you grafted. Wednesday, I come back. I take mama off, pick the box that's got the graft up. I put mama on the bottom. I put a queen excluder in and put my grafts right on back on top, and they raise my queen cells. And I keep feed on them all the time. Now, have I confused you? Day 1, you set it up with mama up on top. The hive you're going to graft into, or the box you're going to graft to, down on the bottom, and you've got some honey. You've got 2 or 3 frames of cap brood hatching. You got a frame of open larvae here. They get some nurse bees over next to your graft. The space where you're going to put the graft in, and your frame of pollen and honey right next to it. Next day you come back, you got your whatever hive you're going to make mama the bees, the one you're going to graft from. You put your grafts right down the middle and put it all back together. And then the next day you check to see how good a job of grafting you did and reverse them and take the double screen out, put the queen excluder in the middle of them. They won't tear those cells down. You're raising swarm cells, basically. And you're not raising swarm cells, but they are like swarm cells. So you get really, really good queens that way. And I learned that from Chris Warner at Indian Summer Honey Farm. So now I don't have much trouble. And you know, virgins would fly in these dang things and tear the cells down. They can find a queenless hive. They'll come in. And then you've lost your fit. You've done all this work and got your cells grafted, and 3 days before they hatch, boom, they get eaten down. It can be very aggravating. Very, very aggravating. But you know, the splitting using this is so handy in so many different ways. There's so many different uses for it. You want to winter a weak colony all winter long, and you got a real strong colony, you put that weak one up here, and the heat will come up and help warm it. That's a big help to a small colony when, you know, the wind gets blowing real hard and wind chill. There's just a lot of uses for it. So I don't use it that much here, uniting stuff together or wintering stuff, because I go to Florida. But I've got a bunch of these that I raise queen cells with. I used to, when I wintered here and I was here all year long, I had a double screen for every hive I had. And I was nice enough to give most of them to people because I don't use them much anymore. But it's the most handiest tool you can find. And you know I've kind of hit a lot of things here, but if you want to make splits, you know, you don't have to find the queen. All you got to do is shake the bees off, the number of frames you want to use, put it above the queen excluder, let the bees come up and cover it. You can take that to another bee yard. You can put them in a newt box. You can put them above a double screen, let them sit. If your queens are not coming in, say you got your queens going to come in today, and it's going to be cold starting yesterday for the next week, and it's in the springtime, you can shake your bees off and get them all set up beforehand and put them above this so they don't chill, leave the door closed. And if it's cool in the morning, you can run out there and, you know, make sure they got honey. But then when the weather warms up, go through, knock your queen cells out and put your queen in, and you're probably going to get 99% take, and you're done. But there's a lot of different uses. Now that I've confused everybody doing 3 to 4 different things, questions? Surely you got a question. I didn't do it that good.
Did you make your double screen board?
This was scrounged together last night in a quick deal. Normally I use 8 mesh screen. I use whatever screen wire I find. I didn't have enough, so you got 8 mesh here and screen wire there. But I staple it down the middle. But I had to throw this together quick, you know, have something to use. Normally it wouldn't be about maybe a third this thick or half. I usually put about 3/4 inch between the 2 screens or something, and put a block of wood or something through the middle so they can't, you know, they don't get mashed together or whatever. I saw someone post on the internet the other day, well, can I do a walk-away split? My bees are strong, we got beautiful weather. Yeah, but you got to think, you do a walk-away split, say the 15th of August. She's not going to hatch till about the 1st of September. She's not going to start laying about the 15th of September. She ain't going to have no bees hatching until 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th of October. You ain't got much time. Takes 7 if you got drones, and I don't have very many drones. And if your drones are good. Now, this is a different subject, but since we talked about splitting and raising queens and drones, I mated 100, I just told her this, I made 102 queens in the fall 4 or 5 years ago. It was real dry. I got 97 takes. I was tickled pink. In 6 months, 2/3 of them were drone layers. And John in there can tell you why, because I called John and Kent Williams. They're 2 of the best stuff. I said, what did they do wrong? What went wrong here? I can't figure it out. The pollen that you have in the fall, if it's not good pollen, the drones will shoot blanks. And you can't raise queens on poor pollen either. And your bees that go through the winter are a different bee than what the summer bee is. I would be a summer bee. I'm kind of skinny and my belly's getting bigger as I get older. I call winter bees fat bees. They're actually a little bit bigger. They have the fibrogellin, that they live longer. And if you don't have good pollen, they can't build that. So I think, you know, since I started keeping bees in 1977, none of us knew this. This is a lot of new stuff that we're learning through research that's very important, that will really help us be better beekeepers. And the one thing that I can go back and look at that's different today and then, I hardly ever fed my bees back then. Very rarely. because nobody mowed their fields off like a golf course. The fence lines were grown up. He's from down where I'm at. Down in Buckeye and Gary County, I used to make 2 to 3 boxes of fall honey. I went down there yesterday to feed bees. Here's a nice big field of goldenrod and aster, mowing it off. Well, it don't do good to mow it this late in the year. You're burning diesel fuel, but you're killing me. Now they use 4-wheel drive tractors, these steep hillsides they used to not mow, they're mowing. That has a big effect on the bee business and nutrition. You know, because you don't have that variety and different. It's like diet. If you went home and ate peas every night, you're not going to be healthy. We don't have the variety of different plants and nectar and pollen, diverse diet coming in. It's hard on the bees. And that's much different than it used to be. I remember it used to be in August, I get a little patch of nectar like that up in the super. I fed some of my hives as much as 5 gallons of syrup already, and they're still light. And I usually don't have to feed much. But it's just the drought, last fall's drought, June drought. We haven't had any nectar flow where we live since 1st of June. And now this drought. And I hate to tell you how much syrup I fed since 1st of August last year. It's going to come close to 5,000 gallons.
But your bees are alive.
Just to keep them going, just to keep them, in good shape. People say, I don't feed my bees, so if you don't feed them this year, you may not have none come spring. It's going to be a weaning time for that. All right, on this double screen and on splitting, I ran through that pretty quick, but I make it, it's a simple way to do it. There's not much else that, it's not complicated where you got to go find all this stuff. You just, if your hive is strong enough, your bees are going to come up and cover that brood, so you get plenty of bees coming through that queen excluder. The splits I made last week, which 100, I used 2 frames of brood, frame of honey. They're big, strong hives. Most of them, I got 4 and 5 frames of bees in them with that 2 frames of brood. So I'm going to have 5, 6 frames of bees next week, 4, 5, 6 frames of bees, which is plenty of bees, especially since I go to Florida about Thanksgiving time. So, that kind of, if you don't have enough bees in the hive, and one thing I've learned, I've had a few hives that, when you're going down the road, you do a mite treatment, versus me when I got 4 on a pallet, it's easy, somebody calls you or something happens, you miss one. And you always miss 1 or 2, and then, when you find it, in the fall, when you find a high mite count, oh, I missed that one this spring. Well, I found one, it had gone way downhill. They've come back, they got all kinds of brood in there, but I couldn't split them because there wasn't enough brood on the bees. If I'd split them, they'd chill. There's enough bees in there to keep that warm, but if I pulled a split out, it would have been hard on both of them. So you want a lot of bees on those frames before you start splitting, especially this time of the year or in the spring if it's going to turn cold. And that's why I talked about leaving this door closed. You make a split, say the last of March, 1st of April, and it's really good, and it's going to be 15 degrees and turn cold for 2 days, leave that door closed. Don't let them come out. Don't let them chill. It ain't going to hurt nothing. And then it warms up, let them out. That way you don't have your brood chill. I've had brood chill when they all went back down there. And that was before I used the excluder. Let the bees cover it. I've got young nurse bees, then they don't fly back down.
Rick, when you were talking about at the beginning, moving the frames up, putting your queen excluder, letting them come up, once you separate it and then put it the double screen board on, they won't make, being that it's open, they're not going to make their own queen up there.
I'm going to give them a queen up there, but
Right.
they will up there. Yeah, above that double screen, they'll make a queen.
Will they
They'll make a queen above the queen excluder.
Even with the screen,
Mm-hmm.
they'll still make a queen up there.
Well, I'll tell you what I did, and they'll do this, and this is another warning. I tried to teach this guy, the guy in Florida, I got so mad at him, I basically almost fired him. He had this brilliant idea that run a story and a half hives, if that top half story was honey, he should move it up to the top and put the excluder on and put the empty super down here. And I was like, no. If it's got an egg in it, they'll make a queen if you do that. And then you'll have a swarm. Oh, no, they won't. Well, he did it on 4 or 5. I went back and showed him they did. These nukes that I had, some of them were like 3 stories. So when I split them last week, I took, they got anywhere 2 to 3 frames of brood in each one, and at least a frame of honey in each one. That third one up had queen cells because I made it, and 2 days later before I pulled it off, they'd started queen cells with royal jelly because there was no queen for them up that top box. And all it was a queen excluder. It wasn't no double screen, it was just a queen excluder. She couldn't go up, but they started making queen cells. Had 4 supersedure cells.
Wow.
So it's the pheromone that does it. So that's, you know, that's one thing to keep in mind. And that's, I think it's good to wait 6 to 12 hours to put a queen in when you make a split. I think it's better to leave the cork in, since queens, especially if you're a small beekeeper and you're paying shipping $45 a queen. I mean, that's expensive. That's a lot of money to me. You know, I'm old school. I don't spend a lot of money. That's why I raise my own queens most of the time. Wait and go in there 6, 7 days after you make that split up and knock the queen cells out. Yeah, it's going. You know, you've lost 2 or 3 days of brood rearing, but is it worth $45 queen? If it's a split, she's going to catch up with it anyway because she's not going to have a full hive to lay in. But you can't miss one. You miss one, they'll kill her. You got to be thorough, and they'll hide them. They're good at getting on top and hiding them and putting them down here in a corner and all sorts of little places you don't want to look. But you know, if you really want to be safe, you can shake the bees off, and make sure you don't miss any. I typically let my wife do that. I'm serious. I married this girl a year and a half ago in the Philippines. She grafts. I could pull a frame and get it halfway out of the hive. The queen's on that hive before I get all that. There's Mama. I mean, she's got that eye. And if I want to find a virgin, I think the hive's got a virgin, I say, here, I'm going to do something else. You work this hive, find a virgin in there. She'll find it that quick. She's just natural. I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed to have her. But that's, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this, and paying attention to the little things is as important sometimes as the big things. And, you know, when you're in this deal, the whole deal is, if you want to make a lot of honey, you got to prevent swarming. And if you want to make a whole lot of honey, you run a 2-queen hive, because then you got 16, 18 frames of brood just when that honey flow starts. And the secret to that is, a brand new queen that's a month old has not much propensity to swarm. They don't hardly swarm unless you just don't give them the room. Or a queen 2, 3 years old, Mother Nature says, well, we got to swarm, make a new queen, you're getting old, and then we're going to kick your butt out and raise a new one. And I kept my swarming at about 1% when I had 100 hives and ran 2 queen hives here in Kentucky. I had about 1 out of every 100 swarm. You walked in the bee yard, if you average making 2 boxes, 80% of them made 2 boxes. There'd be a few make 3, a few make 1. But it's all even. If you don't even them, if you don't get everything right, the strong one swarms, doesn't make much honey. The weak one don't swarm, but it don't make no honey. And you only make honey off the mediocre hives. So why not take the strong hive, and if I had a weak one that was going to run a 2-queen hive, I may get a frame of brood from that hive, and a frame of brood from this hive, and a frame of brood from that hive, combine them for the top queen, and that equalized those 2 hives. Now you got 2 good hives. And one thing I learned on making splits that'll really blow your mind, we did this plain. I was making splits and I forgot to take enough pallets to the bee yard. And I think this is why. This is my mentality. Now I don't know, I ain't got no scientific evidence. But we stacked the splits up 4 high on pallets and took them to where I was going to put them, and went out to daylight the next morning and set them all off. I got almost 100% take. Why? Their pheromone smell was all confused. 4 different, they didn't know who was what and what was who. They'd sit there all night long with 4 different hives combined together as splits, and each one of them had 2 frames of brood and a frame of honey in it, and they're like, and it evened them out. The ones maybe had 5 frames come up, and the one that only had 1 or 2. You had them more even. All your splits were about the same size too, so that worked. And I think it was because that pheromone in those 4 hives, and I set them off right at dark, off the hives on the pallet, moved them to another bee yard, and set them off at daylight. They don't know who's what and what's who, but this time I've got them so confused. We put a queen in there. Oh, we got a queen. Let's go. So I had that. I think that had a big effect. Now I haven't done it again. If I had a few hives, I might play with that just to see if it would work. You know, don't mix my brood up when I make my nuke up to confuse them. Sounds crazy, but I think it works. Because I think you mixed the pheromone up. They're specific odor for the hive. Questions? That's something I learned by accident, by the way, but I think it works. I'm kind of guessing. Questions on splitting, swarming?
Being commercial, how often do you change your queens? You change every year?
I used to when there was no mites and the junk wasn't in the hive. My queens would go 2 to 3 years. Most of the time, I never had a queen fail that was not over 3 years old. I had a queen one time that laid 6 years, 1982. Best queen I ever had. You kicked the hive over, she wouldn't sting you. She always made more honey than anybody else. Never had to feed her going through the winter, and always pull a nuke out of her. And she was that long. I never had one that good. That was a breeder queen. I didn't know what I was green behind the ears. I hadn't had bees that many years. Now, some of my buddies do it twice a year. I'm pretty much on almost every year. And I had to buy queens this year because we had no honey flow in Florida from the freeze, and the hurricane effects were 120,000 hives went underwater. The citrus is dying, citrus greening, which is carried by a psyllid that came from Asia. It stops the arteries up to the tree. So we didn't have no nectar flow, and we had a freeze that killed the willow and everything, had no pollen. You can't raise good queens. And even some of the nukes I've sold, I bought some queens and sent to people because, I had a few problems with them. That was because of weather. That's something you can't control, Mother Nature. But now, I requeen every year, just about. And I requeen, here's how I requeen. This year I went in and caught all those queens and killed them. That's because I didn't have a honey flow and had time to do it. I put a queen cell in a protector, put her up in a super during a honey flow. 80% of the time I get a new queen. She'll go through the excluder. I put a super on, excluder goes on. I don't want brood in my supers. She'll go down through there and she'll kill that old queen, and you've requeened it. And I figured that out when I had some guy gave me the wrong queens and they were mean years ago, and somebody told me to try that, and I got some real yellow queen genetics from a guy, and I put those queen cells in there, and 2 months later my bees were gentle and yellow, so I knew what happened. So you get about 80% that way. One thing if you're thinking about rearing queens or doing queen rearing, there's 2 important things. One is don't have every hive the same color. I use Walmart. Somebody mix match paint whatever color they got, or I'll take spray paint and put something on the front. And I've got 4 on a pallet sitting next to each other. I'm still getting 90-something%. Second thing is windbreak. For God's sakes, don't go put them out on a pond dam where the wind's coming across that water and hitting them. I did that once. I got 50%. Learned that was a no-no because she's coming in, the wind catches her, she goes over there. Didn't work too good.
You say once a new queen comes, she'll go through before she starts breeding, she'll go through.
But a virgin can go through the excluder, yeah. Sure will. Now once she's gone out and mated, that ain't gonna happen, but once she swells up. Unless you find one of those bent places in the excluder. And then if they get in the honey super, they don't get down there at the bottom. When they go all the way to the top, put 2 or 3 frames in every one of them. And if you don't pay attention when you're pulling honey off, you take your queen to the honey house and you're extracting and you got this clump of bees like this, you're like, well, what's that? Oh man, there's my queen. Where'd she come from? Well, who knows? Who knows where she came from? That's happened. That's why when I pull a box of honey, I look up and look at it every time to see if I see brood. But my help sometimes don't listen. If I had help, I don't have help anymore. It's just last 2 years it's been me. Nobody wants to work. Any other questions? I'll tell 2 little stories here real quick. One, I hired a guy 4 years ago, paid him $15 an hour. 20 years old, he wanted to go to Florida, have me pull honey. He worked 20 minutes, got down under the truck, said, I'm tired, I'm too hot, I quit. $15 an hour. And he struggled to put a box of honey up on the bed of the truck. I was going to do mite treatment most of the day. I used to take a pallet and couldn't pick up a box of honey. I don't mean the deep, I mean the medium. I went over and picked the deep up, put it above my head. I said, son, I'm 65 years old, look. But anyway, the story I was going to tell you, we had a local beekeepers group. And really nice couple in there, good farmer, but they were up in their 80s. And he talked like this all the time. And big fingers, big guy. And his wife's kind of short. She talked like this all the time. Well, she comes in. Well, I'm going to tell him what you did to me. Now, Delia, you don't have to tell that. Just be quiet. You don't have to tell everything you know. Well, I'm going to tell it. Please, honey, you don't have to do that. Well, he had a swarm come out and it went up in that apple tree. He got his ladder out there and he held me to hold the ladder while he got the swarm down, and he climbed up there and he shook it in the box. He dropped that thing upside down on my head and I didn't have no veil on. I thought I was going to roll it. Now, I can't tell it as good as they can, but if you can imagine that deep voice and that high-pitched voice, nicest people in the world, I laughed till I thought I was going to croak. You know, hilarious. And then I had some Amish people, or Mennonite, I can't remember which, called me, wanted me to take some bees to Florida. And this is 20 years ago. Had a terrible fall, and I had sold some honey to them. They said, our bees don't weigh anything. Will you take our bees down to Florida for you? And I said, sure, I'll take them. I don't care, you know, ain't no big deal. So I took them to Florida. And I said, you know, whatever honey I make, I'll keep. What if I don't make anything, I don't make anything. I'll bring them back to you. Y'all buy a lot of honey from me. And, you know, wasn't that many hives, 15 or 20. And I said, if it's all right with you, I'll commit them as communal property. In other words, this hive over here loses a queen or it dies, I'll take some brood from some strong ones and make that guy a new one up, and everybody get a nice big hive of bees back that's ready to make honey. Everybody wins. So when I brought them back, I said, I don't have time to run these down to you. I got to go back to Florida and get another load. The smoke had closed the interstate down I-10 for about 2 weeks because all the woods fires, and I couldn't get the bees out. So they said, well, we'll come and get somebody to bring us up there. I said, all right. I said, before dark, they're on a pallet. Bring your bottom boards, because I took them off their pallet, put them on off their bottom boards, put them on my pallet. I said, bring your pallet, or bring your bottom board to put these on your bottom board and tie them together, but get there before dark and put them on there. And before it gets dark, set them on the back of your truck and smoke them real good. Don't close them. Right at dusk, and then go, and then the next morning, right at the sun comes up and it gets light, unload them and take them where you want to take them. They won't give you no problem. Okay. I get back to Florida the second load, the phone rings. Mr. Sutton, could you bring those bees down to our place when you get back? And I said, well, I thought you was going to pick them up. Well, we was, but we's bad listeners. I said, well, what did you do? Well, we decided it'd be best if we waited till it got dark and we not smoke them or anything, and we just reach up and grab them and put them on the truck and surprise them before they knew we were there. We'd all be better off. And that didn't work too good. I said, well, how many did you get? Well, we didn't get any of them. Said, one of them is sitting out there in the gravel in the parking lot. If you don't care, could you put that back on the pallet for us and look around and see if you can find my brother's shoe and the flashlight? That's a true story. So that's the honest truth. That really happened. I laughed till I cried. I mean, the good people, but she said, I never forget, she says, we's bad listeners. One other good one, I was flying to the Philippines, couldn't hear out of this ear. I don't wear a veil a lot of times. I go without a veil, especially if I know my bees. And couldn't hear. I get that Q-tip, and I dig, and I dig, and I dig. And I get 4 Q-tips of wax a day out of it. And I go to the doctor's office, and he washes, and this nasty stuff keeps coming out, and I'm kind of embarrassed. Something's in your ear. Oh, it's a bee in your ear. And I had gotten stung, and she'd crawl down in there, and I used that Q-tip, and I guess I rammed her all the way to China. And cost me $50 or $75 to get my ear washed out. But yeah, I got the bee yard one time, drove 20 miles. Left the veil home. I've left hive tools home. I've plenty of hive tools. They need to come up. They told me that's crazy. I worked all 110 hives, honey flow was on, got one sting, no veil, short sleeve shirt, and I was equalizing them, going all the way through the brood boxes. So I'm not too smart sometimes, but I do work without a veil a lot. I've been stung so much you probably make anti-venom out of my blood because I don't swell, don't hurt, don't itch. I just get stung on the nose, I sneeze for an hour, and that's about it. Anyway, any more questions? I like to entertain a little bit while I'm at it. You're welcome. Thank you.